any further ado, I want to bring on Eckhart Tolle, who is connecting with us from Vancouver, British Columbia. Eckhart, welcome.
Hi, I'm here on a beautiful spring late afternoon. Fresh greens everywhere, flowering trees, wonderful scent in the air, and very easy today to enjoy the present moment.
Glorious, a glorious Vancouver spring day. I was recently with you, Eckhart, in Vancouver, and we had the chance to enjoy some of that springtime weather together, and I'm so happy to have this chance to be with you now here in this webinar. So let's get started. Here's the very first question. Your new course is called The Power of Presence, and of course, many of us know you through reading your book, The Power of Now. What's the relationship between presence and the now? And how do I know if I'm actually experiencing presence?
Well, that's interesting questions. It's kind of two or three questions together, but they're related. Let's start with the last part. How do I know that I'm experiencing presence? If we want to use words in a very, very precise way, then it would not be correct to say that I am experiencing presence. So if you want to be very, very careful with the way you use words, to say that somebody can experience presence is actually not correct, although when we use language in a more casual way, then of course we say it. Now, if you say I'm experiencing presence, there's a separation there. There's me and there's presence. There's a subject and an object. But presence cannot really be an object in your consciousness, because presence is consciousness. So consciousness cannot make itself into an object. So when you say, I found it, there it is, then that's not really it. So, but because we have to use language immediately creates a duality. And every sentence structure has a subject and has an object. And so conventionally we use that kind of language. To be more precise, one would have to say that presence is the now that's becoming conscious of itself. And in order to understand that, let's look for a moment of what the now actually is, because that was the first part of the question. And what's the difference between now and presence? Now, in a very an everyday usage, now is just whatever is going on at this moment is the now. So it's usually in conventional usage, the now refers to what's happening right now. So that means it's your sense perceptions, or even anything that's happening inside you, emotions or feelings or thoughts, whatever is happening, happen and now come together. Nothing can happen in past or future. It just looks as if it could. But as we all know, and I wrote it at the beginning of The Power of Now, nothing ever happened in the past. It happened in the now. it's a paradox even to say that. Nothing will ever happen in the future, because when it happens, it will be now. So the word happen and now belong together. Nothing can happen that is not now. So first of all, we have then the conventional usage where the now is equated with what's happening. And that is certainly true, because when you become aware of the present moment, then you become aware of sense perceptions or feelings or emotions or thoughts. So right now I could say, what is it that makes up this now here? And for us now, there's a screen, you're looking at me, you're also peripherally aware of wherever you are, the room you're sitting in. And so there's sense perception, auditory, visual. You might be aware that you're breathing. You might be aware even of your inner body, the aliveness in the inner body. So that's a good thing, because that is you're entering the now. And when you enter the now, at first you become aware usually of sense perceptions and whatever is happening externally and internally. That's all happening now. It's not yet, that is not the deeper level of now. I call that sometimes the surface of now. So the surface of now is all those things that I just described. You could say that the absolute surface is the so-called external world that is perceived through your senses, and then you go a little bit deeper, and then you go the unseen. The unseen is thoughts and feelings, because you cannot see a thought. The thought exists in the invisible already, so it's a little deeper. But all that is what is conventionally called the now. So living in the now then conventionally speaking means that you are very much aware of your sense perceptions, and you're also aware of inner whatever arises internally. But it's still the surface of now. If you now add something else to it, and that something else is, you become aware of yourself as the perceiving consciousness. And when you become aware of yourself as the perceiving consciousness, you have gone deeper into the actual essence of now. So the surface of now is what's happening around you. As you go deeper, you become aware of yourself, but not the historical person, not the person with the past and the future, of yourself as that which is perceiving internal and external perceptions. Now that's very interesting, and I hope that as I'm speaking about it right now, I hope that you are able to realize at first hand what it means to become aware of yourself as the perceiving consciousness. Now, another way of putting it is you become aware of your sense perceptions, but you become aware also of the space in which the sense perceptions happen. That's the now. That is the deeper meaning of now. It's no longer the surface of now. So the deeper meaning of now, there's a stillness inside you against which everything happens. That's the backdrop to whatever is happening. There's a still presence, and a still, alert presence. And that is the pure now. And so when we go to that level of now, the deeper level of now, that is, or another way of putting it is, that is the essence of who you are. So the deep meaning of now is you are the now. in your essence. I had never, when I was writing The Power of Now, I never formulated it in that way. It came to me later, otherwise it would be in the book. But it's a great realization that when you become deeply aware of the now, you become deeply aware of yourself as the consciousness. And then you have the two, that's presence. And then you are present, which means you can sense that presence, and at the same time, but that presence, has no form. It has no, you cannot say much about it, you can only experience that as yourself, or it experiences itself, it would be a bit more accurate to say. So right now, here we are, you're aware of there's your visual perception, there's auditory perception, and there's you might want to even look around the room you're sitting in, and you can be aware of your body, your inner body, and then at the same time be aware of the presence that you are, which means there's a stillness while you're perceiving. There's a stillness in the background of your perception, an alert stillness. That's presence. And so one could say, therefore, that when the now, which is consciousness ultimately, timeless consciousness, when the now becomes conscious of itself, that's presence, that's the awakening consciousness. It's an amazing thing. I don't want to complicate it too much by talking about it, because words can be helpful as signposts, but when you start trying to work things out mentally, then they can obscure the immediacy of the truth. And the deepest truth is who you are in your essence, which is the now. So right now, you can get a taste of what it means to perceive no longer as a person, because when you're not labeling your sense perceptions mentally, when you're not interpreting, comparing, looking to the next moment, remembering the past moment, then you're not perceiving as a person anymore. So when you're really present, the person subsides and something else emerges, and that something else is not different from the person, it's a deeper dimension of the person. The person is a surface phenomenon. And so it's a wonderful realization that you and the now are one and the same. So I remember the last part of this question was, how do I know? Well, if you're able to understand what it is I'm talking about now, but not conceptually, but experientially, then you know what presence is. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then there's still an obstruction in you. You're still trying to understand through the conceptual mind.
So Eckhart, the very first module for the upcoming Power of Presence course is called To Think or Not to Think. And in this module, you teach about the importance of not identifying with our thinking minds, with the conceptual thought process, with what you call the voice in the head. And we had a listener write in, I find that my mental programming jumps quickly to judgment. It doesn't affect how I interact with people. They're just thoughts in the mind. However, despite knowing that they're judgments, they continue to come up again and again. Is there a practice I can do to reduce judgment in the mind?
Yes, well, every judgment is a thought. It's a type of, particular type of thought. And when thoughts arise in you, and the question is, are you aware of these judgments in the moment they arise in you, or are you aware of these judgments after they have arisen in you? So you have to examine that in yourself. It could be that you're only aware of the judgment after it's already, maybe even a few minutes later, or it could be that you're actually aware in the moment that certain thoughts are arising in you. And that is a great gain in consciousness, because you're not identified with the judgment or the thought. There's an awareness in the background. So it's not absolutely necessary, unless you're already perhaps extremely advanced, and I'll come to that in a second, to eliminate certain types of thought. But if you can be there as the presence behind the thought, then you're not identified with the thought. And then it's not really a huge obstacle anymore, because the thought does not assume your identity. The thought is a thought that does not contain self anymore, because who you perceive yourself to be, your sense of self, is derived from the awareness, no longer from the thought. That means even though the thought may still be occurring, you are no longer imprisoned by the thought, you're no longer completely identified with it. It's not really a huge problem anymore when you recognize a thought as a thought. It only becomes problematic when it takes you over, and there's no longer you and the thought, because you become the thought. So if you can be aware of thoughts arising, perhaps thoughts that have been there for a long time, conditioned by your past, it's not a huge problem. In fact, it's already a spiritual practice to be able to be aware of thoughts arising. And if you are aware of thoughts arising, that means they will also subside fairly quickly. If you're not aware of thoughts that arise, then every thought that arises draws your attention in like a magnet. It places a hypnotic spell on you, so to speak, and the thought says, follow me. And so you identify with the thought, it takes possession of you, and then it grows, or it proliferates. It can lead to other similar thoughts, or it becomes amplified, and it becomes a huge thing, a huge problem, a huge issue that only really is problematic in your mind, but not in reality. So to be aware of certain types of thinking means you're no longer in the grip of it, it's just still there. So basically you're already free. Then there's another possibility for perhaps not yet accessible to all, but this is something you may gradually learn, and that is to eliminate thinking, not by attempting to exert willpower, not by, because theoretically, or not only theoretically, it is possible for limited periods of time to suppress thought activity, but this is not recommended. To suppress thought activity, I have met practitioners of Zen, for example. They can meditate for hours on end. Many of them are Westerners, because Westerners can be very determined, and so they have enormous willpower, and so they are able to suppress thought in meditation through the sheer power of will, and it looks kind of like this. And if you stop breathing, that's even better, because then you can really suppress it. But at some point, you have to start breathing again. And at some point, the suppressed thoughts will pop out again, and they'll be more stronger than ever before. And this could happen if you exercise your willpower and you meditate for 2 hours and suppress your thoughts, and then you go back into your private life. The next thing you might find that you're shouting at your partner because the suppressed thoughts are now, you're taking the lid off the boiling kettle. So that's not the way to go. So thoughts cannot ultimately be suppressed. They can be, however, dissolved through not willpower, but intense presence. And that is the kind of presence that you would need, for example, if you were engaged in some kind of dangerous activity. It would require you to be absolutely alert and still, like that's the you may discover in yourself the ability, maybe not yet, or some of you may already be able to do it briefly, and this is an amazing thing, to let go of thought when you want to let go of thought. That is, as I've said before, perhaps my greatest achievement in life is I don't need to think when I don't want to think. That wouldn't get me a good job, probably, if I put it in my resume, but it's a wonderful liberation. So, but do not confuse that with suppressing thought. There's no exertion of will at all. There's no tension behind that. Then it's not presence. Your breathing is calm and probably deep, and there's just the entire frequency of even your entire body is raised, so to speak. Everything vibrates at a higher frequency, and that is presence. And then you go, and the mind is clear. You can experiment to see whether you're already able to do that, maybe for very brief moments. Another thing to do is observe how brief moments of thoughtless presence arise spontaneously when you perceive something, either by looking at it or hearing it. When you perceive something, in the moment of it, or something appearing in your perception, an external thing or sound, in that first moment, there is no thought. There's only perception and awareness. For most people, that's so short they don't even know it's there. Before the mind says something about it, before the mind interprets it, there's a little gap. For example, if I take glasses or something, if I put something up and I show it to you, before you say what it is, you have to look at it. And there's 1 second or approximately before the mind realizes what it is. So during 1 second, there's a pure perception. You don't know yet what it is. It takes you 1 second or so to know it and to actually put it into words, into thought. Look at this. Oh, glasses. But before you said it, there was a gap. So anything, you can hear sound, springtime here in the northern hemisphere, so you hear a bird song, and as you listen, before you say anything about it, there can be the pure act of listening, and if you're lucky, you don't even know what the name of that bird. Then your mind won't even struggle to name it because you don't know. And then you can continue to listen. If you know the name of the bird, the mind will come in more quickly and say, that's whatever, a blackbird, that is a nightingale, that is a whatever. So anything that appears in your perception, if you can catch that first moment of not naming yet, that's an interesting way of experiencing the space of no thought. And if you can really be there in the moment of something appearing in your perceptual field, if you can really be there in that moment, then the naming of it will not happen immediately. The interval of pure perception will become prolonged. In other words, you look at something, and several seconds pass before you interpret it or name it or think something about it. So you look at something and then perhaps your mind says something about it. So if you can catch yourself always in the first moments of perception, or mostly to do with visual and auditory, but it could also be tactile, it could also be scent. You smell this in springtime, there are many lovely scents in the air. And I talked to somebody not long ago who was he's a wine expert, and he has a website where he talks about food and wine, and that's his pleasant job. He just travels around the world eating and drinking and talking about it, writing about it. And I said, have you noticed that when you taste wine, while you're tasting it, you're not thinking? So you're searching with your attention, you're searching your taste buds, but it's pure experiencing. And then usually what they do, they spit it out, and then they start talking about it, and they use words. I mean, it's great, these wine connoisseurs, they have incredible vocabulary to describe these different wines, which I couldn't do. So, but he was surprised to realize that, yes, this is true. When I taste the wine, there's just no thought whatsoever while I taste it. And then the thought comes in. Or he said, sometimes even in the middle of tasting, thoughts already begin. But the first stage of it, at least, is free of thought. So that's another example of this little gap between perception and labeling, between perception and thought. So if you can catch these little gaps as they appear naturally in your life, these gaps will then naturally deepen. And when they deepen, you become a deeper human being. The depth in you grows. The more gap there is between perception and interpretation, the more deeply you perceive. And then what that means is you can look at a tree or a flower or an animal or a human being, and you're not immediately covering it up with a mental label. At some point, perhaps you will, but you're not compulsively and immediately covering it up with a mental label, unless you have to, because there might be situations where you immediately need to communicate. That's a different matter. So, and that is an enormous deepening of your life if you can, if you are able to, in this way, delay thought before thought is added to the perception. And then you will perceive things and life forms more deeply. You can sense the aliveness of a tree, of a flower, and you realize by equating, let's say a tree, by equating the tree with a conceptual symbol, a thought, you're reducing it to very little. You're reducing the depth of it and the mystery of it, the wonder of it, to a little concept in your mind. And the people, of course, this is how they live, most people. They live trapped in a conceptual reality that is relatively lifeless. And so as you are no longer trapped by concepts, you're able to experience the world in a more vivid way and experience the depth and mystery of all things. It's a totally different way of knowing things than knowing conceptually. And of course, human beings, they need to be able to have both. You need to be able to use concepts and thoughts, which are thoughts, but not be careful that you are not being used by them. So that's the, what was the question? The part that I just answered.
Yes, Eckhart, the question had to do with judgment. And this person saying that they know their judgments, but they keep coming up. Is there anything that this person could do to reduce the amount of judgment they experience?
Yes. I believe I have answered it. Either just recognize it for what it is, be aware of these thoughts. That means you're no longer trapped by them, you're not identified. Or if you can, be so present that they don't arise. But not through willpower, just through the alertness of your consciousness. As the Zen master said, when somebody asked him to explain the meaning of Zen, he went like, that's the meaning of Zen. And what that means is pure attention, pure presence. And that shines away or burns up all unnecessary thought. So some people are able to, I've just recommended this other thing that you're able to do, catch these moments, and then they get longer. And so gradually the ability develops in you to let go of thought when you don't want it and you don't need it, and then experience things in a way that is deeper and more alive, but not losing the ability to use thought, because it's a great tool, and sometimes of course you do need it.
Now, Eckhart, we received many questions from people that had a common theme, which is, how do I stay present when I'm dealing with a challenging person that I find difficult to be around? It could be an exchange with an intimate partner or a child who's having a fit or other situations. How do we stay present when we feel ourselves being triggered by someone we perceive as difficult?
Well, yes, I can see why many people ask that question, because it's a fact that people are very difficult. Except you, of course.
Yeah.
I'm talking to the viewer, and you, Tammy.
Yeah.
You deal with things very consciously, so I know that. So, but most people, except of course that still means anybody who is not yet awakening consciously, are difficult to deal with. They are challenging, and of course some are more challenging than others. There are some people who are extremely difficult, and I'm sure you know some. In fact, if people had to name the main sources of their unhappiness, for many people, other humans would be near the top of their list of the main causes of their unhappiness. But it's also probably the case that if you had to name the main causes of your happiness, it could also be that human beings will also be near the top of your list. And sometimes the same human being that is on top of your list of causes of happiness in your life, 2 years later, the same human being is on top of your list of causes of unhappiness in your life. That is not uncommon. So the same person that makes you happy today makes you unhappy tomorrow. Dealing with unhappy people, the moment you encounter a challenging person, whether it is somebody that is close to you, or who is suddenly going through an episode of perhaps pain body, or an egoically motivated episode comes totally trapped in their ego. If at that moment you can remember, the moment you feel that you're being challenged by another human being, if at that moment you can remember what matters here at this moment is my state of consciousness. This is my challenge is not what to say or what to do. What is primary in this situation? This is when you need to be particularly present. You need to be more intensely present the moment you're challenged. This, by the way, also applies to other situations that may be challenging, but particularly to humans. So the moment you encounter an unconscious human, because it is unconscious humans that are challenging, you need to turn up the light of your presence and take it as a signal, as hello, turn up the light, you need to be absolutely present now, otherwise you will get drawn into reactivity and you will become as unconscious as this person. That's an interesting practice. With a partner, you can sometimes detect the sign of it. It's beginning to happen, either in the energy field of the person. If you've lived with the person for a long time, you become very familiar with their energy field, and you can detect a change in their energy field, even if they're not saying anything. And you might know, okay, there's the pain body is coming up in that person. He or she hasn't said anything yet, but you can sense the shift, and that is a signal. That is a signal to you that to be absolutely intensely present. And then see what happens. Then you can deal with it by being in presence rather than being, if you're not present with an unconscious, difficult human, he or she will pull you into unconsciousness every time. So you will either be present or will be drawn into unconsciousness. So it's one of the greatest practices is not only difficult people, but also difficult situations. All the things that are challenging in your life are actually the things that you need to intensify your presence and to speed up the arising of that state of consciousness that we call presence. If you didn't have the challenges, you would not become present. At least it would not be a very deep state of presence. You can achieve the states of presence if you go to a meditation ashram or something like that, and you spend a retreat there, and it's a good thing, of course, to do that. But if the situations around you were arranged in such a way that you would call them ideal for your spiritual practice, that's what the mind might say. I'm not being disturbed by anybody. I don't have to worry about where my food is coming from. The temperature is just right for my practice. It's not too cold, not too hot. I'm eating pure and wonderful food. The circumstances are, there's no noises that are disturbing me. It's all so lovely. One would imagine that you could really make huge spiritual progress, and you might experience inner peace in that situation, but you would become dependent. Your state of consciousness would become dependent on an ideal situation, and the world is not like that. It cannot be sustained. The moment you become challenged again, you would lose that beautiful state of presence. It's not deep enough. So life has arranged things in such a way that the very challenges that you need, that you get, are those that are most suitable for you, and they are the things that you would think they are the things that prevent me from my spiritual practice. No, the very things that you think preventing you from awakening or practicing or being present are the things that potentially will take you deeper into presence. They force you to go deeper. And that's quite an amazing realization, that do not look for ideal circumstances. Use what you have. Use what you have and incorporate it into your practice by surrendering to things that cannot be changed right now, totally accepting whatever arises in the present moment, taking action when needed, but not on the basis of anger or extreme dissatisfaction or aggression, action that arises out of the state of consciousness of acceptance of the isness of things, and then take action if it's needed. But first you become aligned with whatever is in the present moment, internally aligned with the now. So, of course, there are cases, instances when you may not stay with a difficult person if it's not necessary. You may sometimes want to remove yourself. Only you will know in the circumstances whether removing yourself from that person, either for good or while this person is going through something, that is an option also. It does not mean that necessarily you are forced to stay with a difficult person. But if you are, for some reason, because you work in the same room, you're trapped in an elevator with an unpleasant person, then there's nothing you have to really practice. So be grateful for difficult people. Don't seek them out. There are enough around for you not to have to seek them out.
Eckhart, the final module of our upcoming Power of Presence course is on the purpose of life. And we had a listener write in. This person wrote, "I notice that I often feel like my life is meaningless, and this is a source of great pain and inner suffering. Eckhart, could you please tell me, is there a meaning to life? And if so, what is it?"
My advice would be to let go of looking for meaning on a conceptual level and learn to become deeply aligned with the present moment before you let go for a while of any question of meaning, and see if you can be conscious with all the little things that make up the present moment at any given time, and honor those things, surrender to what is, presence practice, no matter what your circumstances are, rather than look for a big thing to give meaning to your life. Start with all the little things that make up your daily life and see how you deal with them, including people, of course. People, whatever situations you deal with how you're dealing with them, or what is your state of consciousness, and see if you can come into alignment with the present moment rather than live in a state of resistance because you haven't found some meaning on a conceptual level. So basically there's an undercurrent that you're kind of rejecting what's here now because you're looking for some greater meaning in life. So the basis for anything that you might do that's connected with your life purpose, the basis is your state of consciousness, your state of consciousness in the present moment. Everything arises out of that. And you don't need to have a particular meaning, to find a meaning in order to dedicate yourself to living in alignment with the isness of things and to appreciate whatever arises in the present moment, surrender to and appreciate whatever arises in the present moment. Honor it, give it your attention. That contains an element of what is conventionally called gratitude. When you honor the little things of life, the things that give me most pleasure is just the contemplation of things. I could sit in my room, contemplate, look out of the window, the furniture, even drinking a glass of water, taking a shower, preparing some food. It's all, there's a loveliness in it all, and there's an appreciation of all the small things that you come across that are part of your daily existence, the air you're breathing, people, the movement of life all around you. Give it attention, be alert, and what comes into it then is, as I just said, an element of gratitude for what is. Not some big thing, even gratitude for breathing, gratitude for the how the light is reflected on the surface. How gratitude for gratitude really means you don't necessarily have to say verbally thank you. It's an inner attitude of gratitude, which means you appreciate life in its manifold manifestations through objects, plants, living beings, entities, humans. They're all manifestations of life. And so you appreciate all that, and gratitude for what is comes into your life. And that can be that is the best basis for finding some purpose that is connected with something activity that you are engaged in. People, when they talk about meaning, they often think, what's the meaning of, what am I supposed to do in life? What's the meaning? But what is the purpose of the universe? If you're not aligned with that, then your life purpose is not going to be very satisfying. And the purpose of the universe is consciousness. The purpose of the universe is to manifest more and more consciousness. And you can see how gradually on this planet, the complexity of life forms grows over hundreds of thousands and millions of years. Gradually, the complexity grows, and the manifold, there's an increase in the countless manifestations of life, which really is consciousness. Consciousness taking form in countless life forms, and gradually there's a growth in consciousness. It comes from some transcendent dimension, and it enters this dimension, and then there's what we call an evolution on this planet, and no doubt billions of other planets. There's an evolution of the universe wants to become more conscious. So if you're not aligned with that, you're not going to be, you're not aligned with universal purpose. Your personal purpose must be aligned with universal purpose to be successful, really successful, not successful the way the world considers success. And so, in order to be aligned with universal purpose, your primary purpose is living consciously at this moment, which I've just described. To be conscious at this moment with things around you, to sense your presence as you interact, to acknowledge things, to see the goodness of life around you, and you are to be present is your primary purpose, to awaken into presence. And if you practice that in your daily life, then it's quite possible, if not likely, that something will come out of that that's to do with finding that extends from there into your personal purpose. So be aligned with the purpose of the universe, which is be conscious. And even if you're in a prison cell, what is the meaning of life? If you're in a prison cell, and let's say they told you that you're not going to be released ever. Perhaps you were very unconscious. You did something in that state of deep unconsciousness, or even you're in prison because you were wrongly accused, and but you're in this prison cell. Can you practice? Can you align yourself with the meaning of life in the present cell? Yes, you can. By being, every moment of your life you practice presence, which means the entire historical person will become burned up in that arising presence, because the historical person it's just too much suffering to go there. So that you transcend the entire person that you were, and what arises where there once was a person, so there's just a place of consciousness, and it's happened to some prisoners, and that's a possibility. So you don't need any particular situation to become aligned with the purpose of life. You can be aligned with the purpose of life and become a participant in this deeper meaning, even if you only have a few more weeks to live. And then you live in absolute, total presence. There's no past and future anymore. No future, no past, just intense presence. That's the flowering of consciousness. Then the universe awakens through you. That's the meaning of life, is the universe awakens through you. And what you do is secondary. The being is primary. To become aware of being is primary. But usually, unless you're very old and there's not much doing that you can do anymore, or you're in a prison cell, but there's some limited doing that may be possible there too. So that is how you can realize the meaning of life in yourself without needing some long conceptual belief system, because you don't want a belief system that gives you meaning, because that would be a narrative, and in conventional terms, if people are not awakened, they need a narrative to give meaning to their lives. But this is not a narrative. This is a living, experiencing yourself as consciousness, and then appreciating all the manifestations of consciousness as life forms. You no longer need to live through a narrative in your mind. Narratives are kind of fictions that you have in your head. Have you read? There's an ancient Spanish novel, Don Quixote, Don Quixote, and he has read. This character has read novels of chivalry, and he imagines in his mind that he's a knight, K-N-I, who is supposed to save people and bring justice to the world. He has a narrative. He's a fictitious character in his own mind, and that gives meaning to his life. And that's an extreme case of what many people do. The meaning is a conceptual structure in their minds, but on the deeper level, meaning is something more immediate. It's not a conceptual explanation. It's more of a realization of what is the meaning of life. It's very hard to talk about it. I've been talking about it, but it's not something to be believed in or anything like that. It's something to be lived. You are the meaning of life, because you are consciousness. You are a temporary expression of universal consciousness. You are a temporary manifestation, it's called a person for a while. You are a manifestation of the consciousness of the universe. And that consciousness is coming to a flowering, and that's the meaning of life. So the meaning of life is inseparable from who you are.
Eckhart, here as we conclude our webinar together, it's such a rare opportunity to have so many thousands of people joining with you online in this way. I wonder if we could just end with a minute in silence together, in silent presence together, if that would be okay and we can join with you.
Very good. So what you can do is you can either close your eyes or you can look into my eyes. I will keep my eyes open, and I can assure you that I'm not going to be thinking. It sometimes can be helpful, perhaps even on a screen, to connect with another human being who is free of mind, just as consciousness, and see if you can just be in that stillness, if you want to keep your eyes open. And if it might help, if it's difficult otherwise, to feel the inner body at the same time. That can become an anchor for presence. So as you look at me or look into my eyes, this has nothing to do with hypnotism. It's the opposite. It's a de-hypnotizing. So just see if you can just be present, and then as you look into my eyes, don't feel that you're looking into somebody else's eyes. It's just one single consciousness, one single presence. And you, Tammy, will let us know when we come to the end of this brief moment of shared stillness and presence. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eckhart, for your deep wisdom and generosity. Thank you.
Thank you.